Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Rogue Sun podcast. That's right, you heard it correctly. Fiery Rogue Sun podcast, a series about a comic book by creators Ryan, Parrott, and Abel. So today we have a special guest, or I guess one of the most special of them all when you really think about it. We have Ryan Parrott, creator, or co-creator of Rogue Sun. How are you doing, Ryan?
I'm good now. I am flattered and you just sprung this on me. It's cool. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. But now we have the rest of these guys. They're just some guys. No, I'm just kidding. We got Ali, Firefly, Radiant Matt, and Charlie. How are you guys doing? Excited to talk Rogue Sun today?
Absolutely. It's been a long time coming, man. 12 issues, 12 villains. It's going great.
Yeah, I'm always excited to talk about this book, especially. It's been finally been getting some good weather. It's been a great weekend. Just finished off that post on Twitter, but that radiant cookie, I just finished it off. That big cookie, I finished it off. I had I don't think you saw it, Ryan. I think Kyle posted it. It has the radiant black logo on it. So that was a good surprise for my birthday, and just had a great weekend. And another treat getting to talk to Ryan about this incredible book.
Yeah, it's no secret that Rogue Sun has had a special sunspot in our hearts since its debut. It's been really cool, and it's really pushed the boundaries even by Massiveverse standards. And we're going to push the boundaries here with the Rogue Sun podcast. And what better debut than with the man himself, Ryan Parrott. Ryan, how's it going?
It's good. I saw the sunspot in our heart. That was nice. That was a nice little touch there. And I just saw the cookie. You ate this whole thing?
Not to myself. I got the whole family. No, I had the whole
Okay.
family. It is a massive cookie. It took 3 days to eat, but
Yeah,
yeah.
you weren't gonna make 23 if you ate that thing.
I get it. I get one every year, and they just kind of throw a random logo. But yeah, my mom this time, she went over way and got the radiant black logo on it. So
very cool.
That was kind of cool.
Next year it'll be the Rogue Sun logo.
Yeah, that's coming up. That's coming up.
Oh, yeah.
Yep, and you got to add like cayenne pepper to it or something like that to make it spicy. So,
That might take a little longer to eat. But
I know that.
Yeah,
Then you
I
ate the
gotta
whole
try.
cookie and everybody died.
Yeah.
I just want to say Rogue Sun number 12, which is where we last left off. That's the last issue that came out. We're going to talk spoilers, of course, so please make sure you've read the issues. One thing that I feel like not a lot of people have talked about, the Rogue Sun number 12 had a 1 in 20 incentive by this artist Carla Witzgala, and it's one of the nicest covers I've seen for Rogue Sun. Yeah, it's just like Rogue Sun with the sword, just being a badass, glorious virgin cover. So you don't got the title or anything interrupting the beautiful art. Me and my buddies, once we saw, I'm not even kidding, we had a chat, everything, the day that this issue came out. We were all talking about the reveal at the end of the page, or at the end of the issue, which is you see Morningstar in their in full glory, big green page, really amazing stuff, jaw dropping, one hell of a cliffhanger. And we started buying all these copies, every single copy we could get of that book. We just started buying because we're like, dude, I we need that cover, we love that cover. And we started convincing other people in the group who started reading, really read Rogue Sun. They were like, oh, this is the big bad of Rogue Sun. My friend was like, oh shit, and they started picking up the copies. So we sorry, Midtown Comics, we bought all your copies, but hey. Couldn't go to any bigger fans if you think about it. But yeah, big key issue when you think about it. How long have you been waiting to reveal that Morningstar? And what when did you come to the choice that you were going to put it there at that particular moment?
Some of it was because so we introduced so I didn't actually know exactly who the villain was when I started the series. I'm gonna be honest. When I was writing Rogue Sun number 1, I kind of had an idea of what were the big bad, but I didn't have an actual thought about it. And then it was when I wrote the second issue, and I wrote that 2-pager. I think is that the first issue or second issue? It's the one with Suave and he takes his helmet off. That's in the second issue, right? Yeah. I was I remember writing I was writing the book and I thought, there's a lot of stuff about the murder mystery and that, but it wasn't a lot of mythology. There wasn't stuff that was building out the larger world. So I was like, let's do these little 2-pagers. And I realized I wanted Suave talking to somebody. And that was the moment I realized that it was weird. It kind of all crystallized. I was like, oh, so he's talking to this voice. Okay, I know who that character is. And then I had an idea of a larger reason. I was like, well, why is he only talking to a voice? And so it started to unpack itself as this idea of maybe there's somebody in another place that can't come here and all that stuff. So yeah, it was like that. So I felt like since I teased it in 2, it's been 10 issues later. It's probably about time I actually showed you guys what that character looked like, because I was like, if I keep pushing this, at some point you gotta, if we're building towards an eventual showdown at some point down the line, the sooner you can see them, the better. So that was sort of where I came up with, was 2. I was like, all right, maybe around 12. I felt like there was a nice moment at the end there that I thought was with the status quo shift, obviously in 12, it felt like there was an opportunity to sort of like double down on that. But to reference what you said about that cover, Carla's cover. So I found Carla. My wife actually found her. We were walking through Artist Alley, and she does a book that I am blanking on the name. Do you remember the name of her book? Skull Masquerade. That's like an indie book, and it's beautiful. And I was looking over it, and I started talking to her about it, and she actually did all the backup art for Gray Girl, which is my wife's story in the thing. And so I was like, you got to do a cover for that. So we were able to get her just enough time to get that last cover in on 12, because I was like, I want you to have a cover over at least the book that you're doing the backups in. So that's why we did that. But it's beautiful, and I love it. That was supposed to be the reveal of that was gonna be the reveal of Night Sun, but then we got the offer to do the Spawn book, and then that's when we got to do and then I was like, oh, if we're doing Spawn, I'm doing Medieval Spawn at night and Medieval Rogue Sun. And so yeah, that's the whole behind the scenes story of how all that came together.
Awesome. I mean, I have 2 follow-ups. The first one is, I'm glad that you mentioned the Spawn thing, because that actually got the attention of like people that even don't even read Rogue Sun. A lot of Spawn collectors were like, oh, this looks really good. Why haven't I haven't been reading this? A lot of people were attracted to that whole thing. So I think that worked wonders. In terms of the mythology, I'm glad you touched upon that, because that's one of my personal favorite. I know we've talked about this on the podcast. Aspect of Rogue Sun is, I think it's so. There's a lot of lore and mythology, and it's really well done. And here's just some things I pulled, just like a quick read through, and I'm sure I missed some. We've got the Tome of Espial, the Bell Estate, the Aviary, the Sunstone, the Asclepius Shroud, the Monster of the Blackwood. We got Parian Jewelry, Raven Queen. We've got like all these little cool things, right? That like feel like they really cement Rogue Sun's corner of the Massiveverse. They really make it feel like its own. And in a sense, even like in the most recent exploration of the 10, 11, 12, the Aviary even feels like Rogue Sun's own existence. And then we have like the Sunstone itself, where all the other the former wielders are. So it's incredible. Like, how do you manage all that? Like, there's just a lot, in 12 issues as well. Like, wow.
Well, that's the stuff that's my favorite stuff from reading comic books. Like, I remember, like, it's funny you brought up Spawn, because like I was like 14, I think, when Image started, and so like I bought like every number 1 of every single Image book that year. Like I bought so many number 1s, they took away my box at the local comic book store, because they were like, you just keep ordering them all, and like you're not, and then they just sit in the box. I only had like enough money to buy like 3 or 4 when I'd gone there, and so they ended up taking my box away, and I was so mad. But I remember like Spawn was like, I bought that obviously because of the art, but then I remember it was right around like issue 6 or 7. I think it's when Neil Gaiman came in and did like 1 or 2 issues with the medieval Spawn Angelica stuff. I remember that was the moment that the story like popped for me, because I remember in that first issue with Angelica, there's like, it's done with like, then it's reading excerpts from like an angel's like a way, like the angel's hunting manual. And I was like, that's so cool. And there was all this, there was like editor's notes, and there was like all this terminology that I didn't know anything about. And I was like, this is amazing. And all, because Spawn up to that point had just been kind of like, a guy in a costume using magical powers, hanging out with homeless guys, and like occasionally fighting the Violator. No offense, Todd. It's a good book, but I'm just saying, like, it just kind of went along for a little while. But it was like when that happened, the mythology kicked in, and the war between the angels and the Spawns, all of a sudden it all made sense. And even though I didn't know what all of those pieces meant, that was the stuff that I loved as a fan. So I knew that was the reason when Kyle came to me and was like, hey, you should do a book at Image. I was like, okay, I want it to be a legacy character, because I love stories about how there's been, when you pick up in the middle and there's been like 10 before and 10 after. Like, I think Matt Fraction's run on Iron Fist is like one of my favorite runs of all time, because there's so much depth and there's so much world building just done in each, even little they'll just say a word about a character, or they'll mention a name, and you're like, who's that character? And then you fill it all in your head. So that's kind of the way that I approach it. I like the idea of like a really rich world that has a lot of, I love underworlds. I love that idea that there's like a world like right beneath the surface, like that of our world, and like that's where the Aviary comes from, and all the magic and stuff. And it just seems like the more I can, hopefully, I mean, look, to be completely honest, sometimes those are fixes where you write yourself into a corner and you're like, the character's gonna die and I need something to save them.
Sure.
And you're like, or like, but like also like I thought there was something cool about like the shroud that they used to help him. Like that moment, I thought there was a really cool like emotional moment that came out of this thing where it's like, well, why do superheroes who get beat up all the time, why don't you see bruises on them? Well, what if there's this thing that you put on, and this idea, and I love that scene about Dylan coming back and just beaten to hell, and his stepmother standing over him and like tucking him into bed and putting the blanket over him. Like there was something like really paternal about that moment, but it also was about world building. So I think whenever you can use world building and hopefully use character at the same time, those things have like they combine really well. And so that's what I like. So I like the Aviary was the same thing. This idea of like, you know, I'm going to use this more later. It's a little bit of a spoiler, but like the idea of like Dylan met like maybe one of his dad's ex-girlfriends or, you know, somebody that obviously they know each other. And it's like, she's flirting with him when she talks to the guy. So like, you know, could be a really interesting conversation they have later on down the line. So like, I like that stuff. So I always try and find the core emotional stuff. And then I just take all the stuff that like family drama and all that stuff. And then you give it like a little bit of a supernatural spin. And then that hopefully gives you world building, and hopefully all that world building is additive and not just a cop out to, you know, solve a problem when you write yourself into a corner.
Yeah, for sure. I actually, speaking about the Aviary and stuff, one thing that obviously one of the most noticeable things about the Aviary is like when you're there, you got to rotate the page sideways, right? Like that's the one thing. And I love how you stuck with it really. And it's like when you're there, it's going sideways. And I absolutely love that. I know there were some people who were, it was too difficult for some people, but it is what it is.
I can't read this.
Now I know, eh? So what, where did that idea come from, and kind of when did you kind of decide to make that more of a consistent thing?
Well, to give Kyle credit, like one of the things that Kyle and I talk about a lot, and he's really good at it, and I'm getting better at it, I think, is his thing he says to me all the time is he's like, we aren't Marvel and DC. We have to push the envelope. We have to find different things, new things. He's like, but also we don't have the same rules that they have. Like we don't have to do the things that they do because they do it. And so he's like, do anything you've ever wanted to do. Try it. What do you got to lose? Nothing. You know, like remember Jim Carrey said something I thought was in a commencement speech. He's like, no one is guaranteed to succeed. So you might as well fail doing the thing that you love. And I thought that was and so like, I remember, so I was writing that issue and I knew, and I was like, you know what? It felt, I got to the double page spread of when they first get into the Aviary and I was like, this is boring. It's just going to be a big shot. It's just going to be, I've seen this 1,000 times. And then I thought it's an Aviary and I wrote it and there was a tower that goes endlessly up and up and up and up and up. And I was like, well, a tower doesn't look good on a single, like a double page spread. It's going to look flat. It's going to look like, it'll look like you're looking at the Haunted Mansion when you look up at the thing above you. So I was like, what if we flipped it? Then you get this vertical like level above it. And so when I told Marco that, he just went to town on it. And so then I was like, okay, if we do that there, I should do that for everything. And then I remembered, I think I might have actually stolen it from X-Force, like number 7 or 8. They did an issue that was entirely flipped on its side. And I always thought that was really cool. Because I think for artist wise, it seems like that's the way you want to draw. You get to drawing landscapes really fun. You get to really, really, especially for team books, it's got to be amazing.
Sure.
So like I remember thinking like I love that they did an issue like that. And I was like, well, this would be a really fun way to go back and forth between our world and their world, and just something I hadn't seen before for fun. I mean, I know some people were I remember one review was like, I like this. I couldn't get past it. I was like, really? You couldn't get past the fact that you had to turn the book? That was it? I was just like,
oh, that's awesome.
Was the paper too heavy for you
Yeah,
too? Like, I just like, I get it. Like, I know people don't like new things, but I just thought that was really, I don't know. It's like, that's what.
Yeah, no, definitely poor. But no, I just thought that was always like a fun touch, and yeah, I love that you stuck with it for sure. So yeah,
I want to do more stuff like that. Like I think those are I'm always trying to come up with something like different and fun that like every few issues we can do something neat, and like that's where the Choose Your Own Adventure came in and stuff like that. Just trying to find stuff that like. Especially when you can find a way that I wish that you can find a way to make it like character driven and you can make it story driven. Yeah. And I feel like anytime because I could have just done a whole issue. It's on its side, but like, I, like you said, I was trying to figure out a way to make it, make it story driven. So it's actually important to what you see.
Now, actually, a quick follow-up I had to that is did that issue, because I remember issue 11, it was for sure like the whole aviary, did that feel like more work than the other issues? Because I remember reading it, it felt like, because every page is pretty much a double page spread almost, right? Like just miniaturized. Like it's smaller. Like obviously the artist got to do more work, but was it any extra for you, or how did that feel?
Not really. No, I didn't have to do anything. I feel now that you say that, I'm like, oh man, I hope I didn't give Marco more work. But to be fair, Marco's really fast.
Yeah.
And so like, yeah, I probably made them do more work. I'm sorry.
No, appreciate it for sure. We thank him for putting in that work, because it was
for me it was the same. I just wrote it in that way.
Okay.
But I didn't think about the fact that they probably had to do extra work. But oh well.
That reminds me. Which issue so far has been the hardest for you to crack and to write? Has it been, and why was it the Choose Your Own Adventure issue?
Well, the Choose Your Own Adventure was hard. That's why I brought in my friend Nick to write it with me. I've known him since college, and I knew that was going to be extra work, and so I needed someone to sort of help do some of the heavy lifting on it. And so he's just awesome. And so that one was hard only because I had cold feet at the end about the loop. Right before we went to we sent it off to there's a spoiler for anybody who hasn't read it yet. There's a point in the middle, obviously, where it loops, and it's designed to be a loop, right? Where it's like, if you keep reading, when we broke the issue, we were like, okay, we're gonna do sort of a Choose Your Own Adventure style book. But I want it to be, like I said, I want it to be character driven, and I was like, what I liked was the idea that if you got to a point to where Dylan is in a spot where he's finally saying, I want to be the master of my own sort of destiny, right? I want to make my own decisions. And so we loved the idea of like, what if there's a situation where we put him in where he's making decisions and he can't get out of his own way? Literally can't get out. Like, you can't move on in the story if he can't. He's trying to make choices, and we like, oh my gosh, that's where the Choose Your Own Adventure came from. We're like, let's put the audience in the exact same situation where you literally are trying to make the same decisions Dylan is, and you can't leave. And so but then we're like, well, the only way to get out of it is if you change and you just turn the page and you don't listen to what people are telling you, and you make your own choice. And I was like, are people going to get it? Because I don't want people to get angry. I don't want people to read the book and just get frustrated and throw it away. And I was like, well, the internet will probably help people, so it won't be frustrating. But what was amazing to me was, so right at the last minute, I was like, we should change it. And Nick talked me out of it. And he said, he's like, your fans are smart and they like your book, and trust that they'll figure it out. Trust that they have invested themselves enough in the story to do that. And I was like, okay. And we did it. And for the most part, I think everybody I've talked to has been like, it was a little frustrating at the beginning, but the minute that they realized what it was, there was a satisfaction in it that I think was really cool. And that made me feel good. Like, I felt like we're talking like the Zelda puzzles, right? It's like just tough enough where it's like, you feel like you had to be a little clever to figure it out. So like, I tried to put as many hints into the beginning as possible to try and telegraph it, just so like people wouldn't get frustrated, because you just never can tell what people's sort of like, like what they're absorbing. Like, so like, but yeah, it seemed like that seemed like that. So that was probably the hardest issue to break, simply because I got scared at the last second. But that one was really fun too, because we just got to do, it's weird how it's only 22, it's like 24 pages, I think 26 pages. There's a lot of story in that issue that I didn't realize. I was like, wow, it goes in so many different directions, and like there's a whole page of like all these possibilities, and it's like I didn't realize how much was going to be shoved into that one book. But that was really nice at the end to realize, oh, I feel like people got your money's worth in that issue.
No, I mean, even if it was a risk, I think it definitely paid off. I could speak for us and pretty much everybody on the Discord, at least, that we've really enjoyed it. It was one of my favorite, like, single issue comic book reading experiences.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah, for sure. And now that you mention it, I'm kind of curious. If you did end up changing it, what would you have changed it to?
We talked about just being more adding an extra 2 pages that would have literally told you what to do. We were going to have we were going to actually reprint the same art and like put this as that, and then change all the dialogue so that it would just show you that it would have been just more specific. It's like, there's no way we were going to cut. Have you guys seen the Neverending Story?
No.
Oh, okay. I'm old here. There's a movie called Neverending Story, and there's this amazing moment at the end where the character actually, the one of the people you're trying to search, literally says, "Bastion, you've been trying to get to me, and you haven't done it alone. There are people watching, and they're part of the story too." And so we were going to actually break the fourth wall and have Ornate talk to the readers and do that. But like that was my answer. But I'm kind of glad we didn't ultimately do that. I think it would have just sort of like it would have felt weird. So that was the idea. But like I said, Nick is a smarter man than I was able to sort of like be like, dude, it's gonna be fine. Don't worry. Yeah.
I mean, I think it would have been cool to break the fourth wall too, but I
I'm sure I will
prefer
at some
the way
point.
it happened. Listen, now we'll be expecting it. But I find it kind of ironic that at the end of the first arc and like starting with issue 7, that's when Dylan started to get more agency in his life, right? And like started to make his own decisions. And then now at the end of the second arc, he pretty much loses all agency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what can we expect going forward with Dylan for him to kind of regain that agency without being too spoilery, of course?
Yeah, so like I said, like arc 1 was to me was sort of a giant metaphor for a messy divorce, right? Just with superpowers. And arc 2, Hellbent, was basically about step parents and how step parents in your life can have both positive and negative effects in your life. Obviously, Dylan moves into a new house, has Juliet in his life and his step siblings, and Caleb in some ways becomes sort of his de facto stepfather. And this guy who comes in and pretends that he's really, trying to help him out and has his best intentions, but also has like larger goals and stuff. And that's what the next arc will be a little bit more about. You're going to hear Caleb. I don't want to say he's the antagonist because I think that's an odd way to phrase him, but you'll start to learn a lot more about who he is, what he wants, and ultimately how he's going about getting it. Dylan has now, so that was the whole point, was the arc. And I wanted the story to be about somebody who's like you said at the beginning, he's like, I'm going to be this is about me making my own choices. I'm going to be my own hero. And then he finally actually finds a person in his life that he thinks is actually helping and supporting him and being that guy. And he actually, like, if you notice it, if you go back and read the Aviary issue, I think it's like 10 or 11, like Caleb tells him, he's like, hey, if you want me to take over, I can do this for you. And he's like, no, man, I got this. This is going to be totally fine. And that's the moment I was hoping. There's been one or two people who were like, the minute he asked to take over, I was getting suspicious. And I was like, yeah, that was the idea.
It was too good to be true.
Yeah,
exactly.
No, it was. I remember I could look back and it's perfect. One of those things where you can go back and it's clearly there. But yeah, at the time, it was just kind of flew over my head. But it was awesome. But yeah, no, it's just
Caleb is constantly manipulating Dylan throughout the entire thing.
Sure.
I mean, you might not, to be just not spoiling anything, like everything he said should be taken with a giant grain of salt. Especially even his backstory as to where he is. You don't just because I showed it and he talked about it doesn't necessarily mean it's all true. Because he was definitely trying to get into that situation where he could take back over. But I don't think that necessarily means he's evil. I think he just doesn't like being in the Sunstone. But anyways, that was the whole arc of that one, was like obviously Hellbent and Dylan are sort of like the mirrors of each other, and the idea that they both, like, even Hellbent had his own stepfather in Morningstar talking to him and getting him to do his own things, and that father stepping, and his real father stepping in and ultimately sacrificing himself to try and save his son. So all that stuff was all tied together. So going into the next arc, I would say, as I hinted in some interviews, obviously Caleb is in control of Dylan's body, and now Dylan's on the outside looking in, and so it's going to be a little bit of a flip from if you watch the first arc, where Dylan was was the one doing everything, and his dads are giving all the advice. Now he's going to be on the other side of that, and so is he going to be helpful to Caleb? How does he feel about having his body hijacked and having somebody take over his life in a lot of ways? And what will it be like when you watch somebody be better at your life than you are? So that's part of the story that'll go into it. We'll also get to learn a lot more about the Sunstone. You're going to see a lot more of the mythology that's in there and how that works. I'm going to dig into more of the legacy of that character. I don't think this is a spoiler, but we will meet other Rogue Sons.
Rogue Sunverse. Rogue Sunverse. Yeah. I knew it.
Yeah.
That was one of my next questions. But I guess.
I have an important question. Okay.
I promise you won't. Look, I'm gonna say something that's probably sacrilege. I am not a huge fan of multiverses just because they're everywhere right now. And look,
Sure,
I love
yeah.
Spider-Verse. Spider-Verse is my favorite Spider-Man movie of all time. I love it. And I already got tickets to see the sequel. I'm very excited. But it's just like everybody's doing multiverses. So,
Yeah.
but this isn't a multiverse. Remember, this is history. This is not a multiverse. These aren't like, it's not alternate Dylans. These are the people who these would be the people who have been Rogue Sun in the past, and different eras and different goals. Maybe they weren't all heroes, so we'll see. So the Sunstone, we'll learn about that. We'll learn about that whole world, and that's going to be a big part of it. And then Morningstar obviously has a larger plan that will come into fruition. And yeah, might see some characters, some villains in the past show back up for some fun scenes, because I really enjoy all that. And yeah, I think that's enough. That's probably enough spoilers, right?
Yeah. All right, I have 2 questions, really good ones. Okay, and you don't have to answer the first one if it's too spoilery, but has there ever been a previous Rogue Sun wielder that isn't a human being?
I will plead the fifth on that one.
Okay, that's an answer. I'll take it. All right, my second question.
I mean, you're talking to a guy who made a cat into a Power Ranger, so
That's exactly what I was thinking. So I'm glad we're on the same page there. My second question is, and this I say as of course a huge fan and a reader. So I love Rogue Sun. It's one of my favorite ongoing titles overall in comics right now. And you've introduced a lot of characters and villains in just 12 issues, built up the world. It's fantastic stuff. And is this like just the beginning for Rogue Sun? Because like as you've said earlier, you have like this really solid premise for exploring a lot of different generations, impact, influence, and legacy, which I think is one of the most important central themes in this book, and you've done an amazing job with. And so, like, do you have any idea in terms of how long you want the series to be? Do you have an endpoint in mind, or do you want to keep this going as long as you can?
I will. Okay, I'll give the nice answer on this. I have an ending in mind. And I know the ending. This is the first book that I've ever had that's gone longer than 6 issues. So
Congrats.
when it's
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm very lucky. It's
That's
been very
awesome.
nice.
Congrats.
It also starts to get scary because you're like, well, how many issues do I got to do? But yeah, right around issue 3, I started realizing, okay, if this ends where, because I didn't know when. I thought 12 could be the end. You never know. You never know. It's the finances of comics and what keeps going and what doesn't is very complicated and scary. So I figured out my ending, what my ending would ultimately be. That ending changed at one point, and now it's changed into something else. But I always have a working ending in mind when I'm writing, so that hopefully that's like my North Star or my Morning Star. And so I focus right on that. So that ending can move depending on if we keep going. And I feel like if I just, as long as I have it in my mind when I'm writing, it will hopefully keep the characters from doing stuff that feels way out of story sense. But yeah, I started to do that. So like I would love to do the book as long as you guys will read it, and as long as people are interested. I will do the book as long as I can. I do think that the fun part about it is, like, I think the core of it, the idea of Dylan, this sort of, no cussing on this, right? Yeah.
Oh, you can cuss. That's fine.
Yeah.
Man.
Dylan's an asshole, and the idea of an asshole slowly trying. I love the idea of taking an asshole character and slowly turning him into a hero. And you started to see a little bit in 12, and him that there's a moment in 12. He's walking on water, for God's sakes. Like, like that was his moment. Like he finally has. He's like, I'm gonna be better. So like you asked earlier about, I think you said something about Reggie. Like Reggie was always going to be my Uncle Ben moment. That was always going to be, from the minute he starts tormenting him in the second issue. I was like, I want that kid. I loved the idea of a bully who just tormented this poor kid and barely knew his name and wasn't nice to him. And then at the worst moment of his life, that kid steps in and tries to protect him and dies protecting him. If that doesn't make you look in the mirror and go, I'm doing something wrong, I don't know what will. And I thought that was something really cool and like nice about that. It was like my version of Uncle Ben, right? It's like, it's not the I love these, like, his last line is, "You know my name?" Like, it's just like this amazing moment of like, wow, like it's like a hero worship thing. So I always wanted that. But I love the idea that the moment he got it, he gets that agency and he's like, I'm going to fix it all. I'm going to do it all. And then literally it gets yanked out from underneath him. And it's like, no, you're not. You're not going to be that thing. And so is that change, that epiphany moment? Like I've always said, like I want it to be moments of one step forward, two steps back. You know, he's like most people in life. You go to the gym for a few weeks and you get it, and then you go out with your friends and you drink too much and you miss the gym and you eat too much pizza. You know what I mean? Like it's that thing. We always intention is not always the thing that we always have good intentions, but we don't always pull them off. So that was the thing that I always want to do. So like I feel like that core is a lot to explore, and I think that, you know, even if I got to the point where you feel like, oh, he completely turned the corner, that doesn't necessarily mean he'll stay that way, and that doesn't necessarily mean he can't, you know, tip too far. So like I love that core, and I love that idea of it'll probably always be a father-son story in some permutation of that, whether it's traditional from the first arc or different. It'll always probably be a family for them. But I feel like I like Dylan, and I would love to keep writing him for as long as possible.
Yeah, and you know, like the fandom has compared this in, I don't know how to say this properly. Not in terms of like the direct comparison, but more in how they love these characters. Like I've seen comparisons to like Invincible and Savage Dragon and things like that. So it's like when you think about it like that, it's like you say what you just said, like, oh, I want to explore family. I'm thinking like, I love that. I love everything you just said. And I think, okay, like what if one day, like you end the issue, like 100 issues in, you know, like this like best case scenario, whatever. And we get to see like Dylan having his own kid and his kid fucking up in the future.
I was just thinking that. I was running through my head.
So it's like because we really like the people who love this book like really love it, and there's a lot of people who when they get into it, like the newer readers who are starting to fall into it, they really like it too. They really like it. Like it's crazy. I said before, and I wasn't exaggerating. I see a lot of people talk about this more than Radiant Black sometimes, even though they're reading both. And when you think about that, like that's an achievement in its own way, because even if like fuck what you prefer, like right, preference aside, this is only 12 issues and Radiant Black's 24. So like this is literally half the amount, but there's so much happening. The people are so excited and they talk about this. And speaking of, the perfect segue, Supermassive 2023 seems predicated upon a lot of Rogue Sun elements. And yeah, I'll let you speak on that. So like what was that like? And that's got to be super exciting, man.
Yeah, it was. I mean, we had to write that like 7 months ago, I think. We wrote it to get Daniele to be able to do it. We had to go way, like we wrote it a long time ago. So everybody's book was kind of in like a weird position. Like you want to get 5 writers angry at each other, basically make them commit to something from 7 months earlier and then like write a story that talks like, you're just like, everybody's like, well, I don't know. I'm not sure if I can do that. Maybe it'll change my mind, you know, like, so it was tough. Like, and I can't say too much because I don't want to speak for the other writers. I do think, and this might be, I think we're going to come back and talk to you guys, I'm assuming, about Supermassive soon. So yeah, so I'll leave it a little bit vague because I'd rather have them involved because, but yeah, like we talked about, that was the hardest thing for me was like, I did an interview for it and people were like, so what can we expect for Dylan in Supermassive 22, and I was like, well, he's a very different person when you meet him, and that was the only coded way I could talk about without spoiling it. It's a very different character. Yeah. So yeah, so you're gonna see Caleb in control of the body in Supermassive, and so that will be a very different relationship between all of them. With, you know, Dead Lucky and Radiant Black and all that stuff. So like it'll be that was the hardest part, I think, of the whole thing, was just trying to figure out where everybody was in their own stories and how this would be a way for them to see it. I think we used it a little bit as a way to sort of like, they all come out the other side of this story looking at their present situations in a different light. That's the best way. That was what we tried to do. It was like, how do we make Supermassive 2023 have some weight to it? Was just like, don't have everybody come in. They come in one way and they exit the other in a very different light. And so that, you know, because we already obviously have our own arcs going forward and stuff like that, how do you shift it a little bit? But yeah, it was a tough one. Daniele did an amazing job. It's one of the most beautiful books I've ever seen. There's something so much fun about watching him draw your characters because like they're just, Like gravity does not exist. And I mean that in a compliment. There's just so much energy to every posture and body language and move. And just like, there's so much crazy stuff that he drew. Like he picks angles that no one would ever pick in a comic. And I love it. It's so good. I got to work with him on Power Rangers. It was so cool to see him get to do Rogue Sun.
Awesome.
But yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. We had a good time with it. Yeah, it's different, and it's very different than Supermassive, the first one. It's not at all the same style story.
I took something, so I actually I really love all these characters. I want to go grab something. In the meantime, I'll let these guys take over, but I'll show you something in a minute. Thank you guys.
Show and tell. We love it.
Cryptic.
What's going on?
Here's the severed head.
I'm a little nervous now.
You mentioned.
Yeah,
go
go
for it.
ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
I was going to say, you mentioned other, you don't want to speak for other writers, but I noticed in spoilers, I'm reading Black 18, but Ori appears in the future with Wendell. So how does that guide where you see the character going? Did Kyle just send a text like, "Hey, I'd like to use Ori"? Like, where do you see this? How does that impact where you want to take the character?
So Kyle and I always have Kyle. It's nice to be able to just text your friend and be like, "Hey, can I drop this character into issue 18?" I was like, "Sure, man." And I was like, "What's the purpose?" And he told me, and I was like, "Does that interfere with anything you're doing?" And I was like, "No." And it was really fun. I was actually, and then I can't tell you what I've said because it's like, but he was like, "It actually means this, this, and this," and then it turns into a 45-minute conversation. He's like, "Okay, I got to go back to writing now. Stop talking about the thing that we want to do." Yeah. So it's nice to be able to have that. I did the same thing with him in 13. There's a moment in the beginning of 13 that I wanted to, with everything that's going on with the Catalyst War and everything, I wanted to make, we're in a combined universe. I wanted to make reference to that. And so there's a little moment, just a tiny little moment in Rogue Sun 13 that talks about what's going on in the rest of the world. That's the one thing that has been really nice about. I don't think we should get any bigger when it comes to the Massiveverse, because we're able to still just keep it casual and talk and be like, "Hey, I'm trying this. We can try that." I remember I was one day when I was doing issue, I think it was issue 5 or 4 of Rogue Sun. I was like, I needed target practice. And I was like, "Oh, I remembered you did that thing with the Kyle action figures in yours." I was like, "I'm going to do the same thing." And then my editor, Michael, was like, "Don't do that. It's the same thing." I'm like, "That's the point. The action figures exist in the same world. We all have the same action figures."
It makes sense. It does make sense.
That was the fun part. I was like, "Let's do the same thing." Yeah. So
I love that idea. Wish it happened, but
Oh, for sure. Really, I don't think we've really got into the crux of this volume 2. The title of volume 2 is Hellbent himself. I'm a sucker for those flaming swords all the time, so once that design was popped up, just incredible. But what, I just want to hear from you. Obviously you're saying it's kind of the mirrored opposite, but what are the biggest similarities and differences you think kind of make them contrast so closely like that? But also, was that a character you always wanted to make from the start, like a mere opposite of Dylan, or did it just come in organically, or how did Hellbent come into play?
I knew that I wanted, so in the first 6 issues, almost all the villains are villains that that had a relationship with his father, right? Cataclysm has a relationship with his father. Billy Bloodmoon does. Demonica. They all were people that were directly connected to Marcus. And so I knew going into 2 that I wanted the villain to be somebody that was directly connected to Dylan. And so that was the idea of opening it in with him going up against Suave again, and sort of, and I always liked the idea. There was something fun about the idea of these sort of faceless henchmen, the idea of you just kick one away and you don't even think about it. And I'm but that's that's a person, man. You just can't do that. And so I love the idea that he does that, and that's what creates this huge problem, is that he just was he was cavalier in treating a human life. And that ultimately explodes. And so when I was modeling the idea, so I wanted that to be Hellbent. So the idea that I came up with the title, the name of him pretty early. I just like the Hellbent, and I just thought, it has
sweet,
the same,
sweet.
Yeah, the thing, and I love cloaks where you can't see the face. So it was pretty easy going on.
It's perfect.
So when I was trying to figure out who the character was, I thought, okay, I want him to be sort of a funhouse mirror opposite of Dylan. So I thought, okay, if Dylan is somebody who is kind of he's kind of, he's charming-ish. He can be a jerk, but he's kind of funny and nice, and people seem to like him. And I was like, what was his relationship with his dad? And so I was like, okay, so Marcus wanted nothing to do with Dylan for most of his life. Okay, so let's flip that. let's have it be that Hunter's dad was somebody who wanted to have everything to do with his life and had this horrible life that was doing everything he could to keep him out of it entirely to protect him from this, not knowing that his son actually. And so Hunter's entire has been pretending to be this great kid going to Tulane for medical school and like all these things and just pretending to be a good person and his dad. And so so Hunter and Will have this relationship where they think they're both lying to each other about who they are. And that's ultimately the thing that destroys them is that thing is like, and I thought there was something equally bad about that. So like, I liked the idea that, because his father, but he does love his dad. His dad, he respects his dad, how much his dad loves him. But ultimately the idea of like, of him trying to be his dad has this sort of like idealized version of who he is. And so there was something really interesting I thought about this idea of like, does that make sense? Like all the opposites, like you have like Marcus doesn't really care for Dylan. Will loves Hunter, but Marcus doesn't like Dylan, but Dylan's actually a pretty good guy when it comes down to like helping people. And Will loves Hunter, but Hunter's a terrible person who's like dealing drugs and beating up people. And like, so there's all these weird flips. And I just thought there was a lot of interesting things where you could have these two guys who ultimately, I wanted to get to the end of the series. They wanted at the end of that arc and want you to go, oh yeah, Hellbent that's why he's named that. And he will never, ever, ever stop going after Dylan. Like this will be what he does for the rest of his life. And I just thought, if you look at like, the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight franchise, the first movie is, it's the origin story of Batman. The second one is the villain that the city rises up against you. And so I wanted that to be the same thing where it's like, now that Dylan was Rogue's son, let's have a villain immediately step in and challenge everything about who he is and all that stuff and have him have consequences for his actions.
I love that. I love that. Now are we calling the dad Hellfather, as we heard, or what are we calling him? Do we?
I think that's what I said.
Yeah.
In the script,
I like that. I actually like that. I like it.
Yeah, I like it too. I just wanted to show you, wanted to own some art of Rogue Sun, and all of them in Inferno, Red, Radiant Black. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, Rogue Sun, Radiant Black, they're done digitally.
Yeah, Abel draws everything digitally. Yeah.
Yeah, and Abel is Brazil, so I don't go to Brazil for conventions often. It'll be like tough to get that done, but I did buy a page from Supermassive, and
oh, awesome!
I do have. So this is technically this issue is the first appearance of Rogue Sun and Inferno Go Red. So I'm really happy that I own a.
Yeah,
you got to put that bad boy in a frame, man. What are you doing?
Oh yeah, I know.
You're in a sheet or something. What's going on? You're scaring me.
I'm moving, and it's been hectic, and it's been a situation.
Coffee on it.
Yeah. No, it's clean, thank God. But I'm just so happy to own a piece of Rogue Sun artwork, and hopefully, one day we'll meet Abel or Marco Renna at one of these conventions and get a chance to get artwork. And that perfectly segues into my next question, which is, looking at Radiant Black and looking at Rogue Sun, both have we're just deducing logically, two committed artists who seem to be working on the title. Radiant Black has Eduardo Fregatto and Marcelo Costa. Rogue Sun, so far, we have Abel and Marco Renna. So is that something that you guys plan to keep going forward? Is it going to be like Abel's going to be the go-to guy for the title, but when he's not there, you're going to get Marco, or is it like a situational thing? You're going to see who's available at the time?
Really interesting question. I guess I can reveal it. Yeah. Marco's coming back to do, Marco's going to draw half of 14, 15, and 16. Because it worked really well for the story. And also just to make sure that we don't burn out Abel. Like, he works so hard. And also the other thing is there's a lot of design work that needs to go into this next run because we're going some new places, and I wanted to not destroy Abel. So I was like, hey, how would you feel about Marco coming back and doing it? And it's specifically for a story reason. When you read it, you'll understand why. But yeah, I really, Marco's one of my favorite people to work with. I worked with him on Power Rangers for a really long time. And also I just felt like they kind of worked together. I didn't feel like there was a huge disparity in regards to style and approach to the characters. And it just felt like those two guys could work together really well. So yeah, definitely. It's fun to get to work with people you really like. And I really like Marco, and I love Abel. He's amazing. Abel is so much. I get lucky because, the writers get a lot of credit for coming up with stuff, but dude, he designed Rogue Sun. That design is all him. And so all of the villains, I mean, it's so fun to throw villain ideas and then he draws them. And I'm just like, I don't think I've ever had a situation where he drew something. I was like, no, that's not right at all. It's always right. Like it's always, I mean, there might be little changes, like little adjustments here, but like he just gets it. His visual aesthetic, his style, I love it. I think he brings so much to the book. I don't nearly give him enough credit. So I'm trying to now. But but Marco came in and really just did a great job for us when we were in a tough situation last time. And it's just nice to be able to let them work together in a more concrete way, I guess is the best way to say it. Yeah.
There it is. Volume 2.
Wanted to show up Volume 2.
That's an awesome cover, man.
Rogue Sun. We put it on the screen. Yeah. So it's coming up May 17th. That's literally in 2 days.
Yeah.
I know I pre-ordered one, and we'll do a giveaway. We'll give away a copy of the trade paperback from Nuri just to get into it. But if you just, putting it out there for people, for listeners, for viewers, check out the Volume 2. It's incredible. Look at that gorgeous, like, Hellbent cover.
Now, that cover's just made for the trade, right?
Yes. Yes.
That's awesome. Yeah,
2 days. 2 days.
And it has a quote from Jonah Nolan on it, which is even cooler. He gave me a quote, which is God bless him.
Amazing. Dude, your quote game has been insane recently. But there's another thing I want to share as well, because we were just talking about, if I can figure out how this works. We were just talking about the entire screen. Oh, there we go. We were just talking about all the villains, and we created a visual to help like new readers, but also just to show them off of all the amazing villains we've had in Rogue Sun so far. We've had a lot, and you look, we try to put them in order of their appearance, like from left to right. So, so if you see it that way, like it kind of makes sense. But yeah, man, like how does it feel to see all that up there? We were just literally like, holy shit, man. I honestly think, and I don't say this like I'm sorry, Kyle, I really am. I think Rogue Sun like has the best villains in the Massiveverse, like by far. Like it's like not even close. Like
they're just all cool. Like
there's just so many. It's like there's so many and they're all cool.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like, damn, I don't know, man.
It's fun, man. Like I've always said that I think heroes are the reason that Batman and Spider-Man, like those, I feel like there's a reason those guys are so great is like their villains are fantastic. You know what I mean? And I really love the approach. I think somebody said it a bit smarter, was like the coolest thing about the Batman and the Spider-Man villains is that each villain is designed to target a different specific part of them. And so I tried to do the same thing. Like I could walk you through how each one of them is, but like, I don't want to spoil too much, but like that was the idea, was I wanted each one of them to target a very specific element of Rogue Sun so that they're not the same. I do got to be better about giving everybody the same voice. Sometimes I fall into a little bit of the suave voice. So I was like, I got to, it's like the thing where like you get in it, you start talking a certain way, and it's like, Brian, you're not Aaron Sorkin. Settle down. Your stuff's not that good. But it's been fun to be able. Also, like it's one thing your graphic shows too. I also try to think into consideration color.
Yeah, no, we were on talking about color and villains and how you take that into account in the design.
Yeah, definitely trying to do that. I try not to make everybody too orange. You got Brown, and Suave's his own thing, and DeMonico was purple, and Ornate was like a brownish color, and then we got all of them, blue and greens and all stuff. Just because if they all fight orange, it just turns into like.
And Rogue Sun's already orange too.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's fair.
So before we shift, who's your favorite villain?
Yeah.
I really like the design for Ornate.
I knew it.
Yeah.
I just think that like I've never seen anybody like that. I just think
cool.
there's such a cool like leather. Like I'm afraid to say this because it's gonna turn into a joke, but for a little while we didn't have a name, and he was just called Time Falcon.
That's awesome.
I like that.
Should have kept it.
That's what we'll be calling him from now on for sure.
Yeah, great.
Time Falcon for the win.
Yeah, that'll probably be what Dylan calls him at some point down the line. That's usually
it.
what happens is Dylan ends up calling the villains that in the books what they were, like the name I couldn't come up with until we came up with it. It's like he called, like I remember he called Finnegan Rot, like Finnegan Root, like a whole bunch of different names. Like I can't remember what they were in the book, but like they're all just like names that I had hidden in there until I.
Did you know the joke? There's like a joke that's going around. Man, one of my favorite things about reading these series and really being immersed in the culture is like some of the inside jokes that come up between the people who really like love this shit. And one of them is, did you know that for the longest time, like Matt made a joke about Finnegan Root being called Reggie Roadkill because he looked like that in the first few issues, and people genuinely thought that was his name. Like people, like People genuinely were calling him that. They were like,
Reggie
"Oh, Roadkill," and we're like, "Did you guys know like his name's actually Finnegan Root?" And they were like, "Oh shit!" So that actually like really did happen. We incepted some people.
I think it was Reggie Roadkill's not a terrible name.
Actually,
Billy Blood Moon and Reggie Roadkill in a buddy cop movie. Yeah,
there we go.
It's too soon, guys. It's too soon.
A quick kind of confirmation, actually, from what we know, and this might be too spoiler, but do you think the Doorman deserves to be a villain?
No, I do not think the Doorman deserves a villain. I think the Doorman is more of a.
We were talking about that, but yeah, okay.
Yeah, I just saw him as more of a protector. Like he had no like in the entire time he's fighting Rogue Sun, he's like, I don't really want to do this. It's just like this is kind of my job. That's right. But I don't think Doorman's a villain. I love that design though. That was actually one of the few designs to pat myself. I was like, I think use the plague crow mask and then give it a hat, and then we could do something really interesting with that. I'm that one was kind of fun because I was just like, that was I don't think it was a villain, but to be fair, I don't know if Finnegan Root is a villain.
That's true. Yeah. That's true.
It's kind of like just sort of like he was just like a supernatural drug dealer.
Philosophically though, maybe parts of the people that make up his body could have been evil. So that's a debate.
Very true.
Wow.
I need wedding covers, by the way. If there's no wedding covers for the Finnegan Root wedding that was in the future vision, I'll be crying. I'll buy all 100. I'll buy the very.
Yep.
Is there any page like in Arc 2? So Arc 2 being Rogue Sun 7 to 12. And in Rogue Sun 1, we had that amazing splash page that had so many Easter eggs for like. Until this issue, we're still discovering amazing things. So I would say, like, is there any other issue or any other page that you would have readers take a closer look at that might have some Easter eggs?
I mean, there's some Easter eggs in the Choose Your Own Adventure issue where I think it's the one where you see like the different time, all the different possibilities. There are things in there. I mean, this is gonna kind of give stuff away. Not entirely. I guess I can kind of say it. Those were possibilities. Those aren't necessarily what's going to happen, and they might not happen exactly that way, but there are pieces in there that are relevant. It's the best way I can say it.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a good answer. It's a very good answer. Oh, that's awesome. Okay. Now Byron, we got Byron and Reggie. We kind of got those two guys there. Now Reggie, I kind of forget like the core difference of them, but was there ever a toss up there, or is always going to be like you always knew that Byron was going to die?
I feel like killing Reggie made a lot more sense because he was like Byron's is like Dylan likes Byron. Like he thinks they're best friends. You know, like if he doesn't quite understand how a friendship works entirely, but like I think he thinks that like that guy is his boy. Like he loves that kid. Reggie, I think he might have barely known his last name. Like he doesn't really know that kid. He just knows that guy was was a problem. So like, yeah, I felt like there was something more important. Killing Byron, I felt would have, I don't know, it would have been a weirder. Yeah, it would have felt more like it would have actually mattered more. I think there was something sadder about it being somebody that he didn't really know and that he'd been horrible to. And then that guy stepping up, like Byron would protect him. That's his friend, but this guy had no reason to do that. And I think there's something that's real heroism. Like is when somebody steps in to, and now granted, he didn't know that was Dylan. Maybe if he'd known it was Dylan, it would be a totally different situation. But like, that's what I liked about it was like, I think there's actually a scene in 13 that deals with Reggie's like I'm not getting too political, obviously, but there's a child that was killed on a school campus. Like that's going to be, it's going to have some weight. And I try to treat that with the amount of respect of a situation and a reality of that. So there's definitely some elements of that. And we deal with that and how the school reacts to it and how the world reacts to it. So yeah, that's all going to be part of it. That was always the intention was, I think Byron I have bigger plans for Byron. So
that's awesome. Well, yeah, I hope so. He's very enjoyable.
He's fun.
Yeah,
he's what he's doing.
He's a lot of fun. For sure.
He has no idea.
Always got to have that guy.
Yeah.
So Obviously, we appreciate Ryan joining us again. It's always fantastic for him to join us, and we don't want to take up too much of his time because obviously he's a busy dude making all these amazing stories. There's currently a writer's strike as well, so everyone make sure you're doing your part for that. Read into it if you haven't. One thing I do want to ask you though, as a writer, as a co-creator of Rogue Sun, so after a year now, it's been a year. You've got 12 issues in the bank, 2 issues already solicited, 13 and 14. Some gorgeous covers. I think Luana Vecchio she's still doing the covers.
Yes, she
doing
is.
the covers. Yep. Like wow. I mean, the covers are the negative space issue. I think 14 cover with like the black background. Ooh.
Yes.
Wow. Yep. So I just want to ask you, after 1 year of writing Rogue Sun, what's the biggest thing you've learned?
What's the biggest thing I've learned? How don't I not get pessimistic here? Monthly comics, and I should have known this from Power Rangers, but your own monthly comics when you don't have like the structure in place of like writing for a licensed comic, it's hard. It's hard finding that thing. And I think the thing that I've learned the most is just like I couldn't have done it without Kyle and Matt and Michael. And I know, look, I know the rhetoric of it all. It's like you get to everybody, they're all friends. But literally, like the coolest thing about the Massiveverse for me has been because I've done creator-owned books in other places where you're just doing it by yourself. And the hardest part about it is you do it and you make the book, and maybe a few people read it, maybe they don't, and it just kind of it becomes a thing that's on your bookshelf, and you're like, oh, that was a fun idea that people thought was cool. The Massiveverse is a whole other thing. It's a little like when I was in college making making student films. It's like we're all trying to do our own little thing here and there, and there's so many logistical elements of doing your own creator book at Image. It's hard. It's really difficult. Kyle does so much for me. He does so much for me, and just like it was the cool. You guys made a joke earlier about, oh, he's got 24 issues, I've got 12. I think if we were both doing this at the exact same time, if Rogue Sun had come out the first day of Radiant Black, I don't know if we would have made it. I don't know if I would have made it, I guess is the best way to say it. Because he did that first year. He went through and saw this the stones and arrows and whatever. Like, and I got to come in and learn from all of that. So he was like, hey, don't do this, try this. And so it's been so helpful to have somebody ahead of the game on that and to help us figure it all out. So like that's the thing that I've learned the most is like it was the power of friendship. I mean, which is kind of a joke, but it really wasn't. It's really fun to make comic books with your friends, and I'm sure it's the same way with you guys on this podcast. It's like half the fun is the community element of it, and I could sell 5 times the amount of comic books the Rogue Sun could sell 5 times, but if I wasn't doing it with Kyle and Matt and Michael and Melissa, it wouldn't be as much fun, and it wouldn't be as good. I guess that's the best way I can say it. Kyle has pushed me to be a better writer, a better storyteller, to try different things, and we keep trying to do that with all the Massiveverse titles. We're always trying to come up with something because we're just like you guys. We're fans, and we read as many comic books as everybody else, and it's like you got to try and do something that getting attention is hard. And I don't mean that in like a way of like look at me. That's not what I mean. It's like making it worth your while is the number one thing that I've learned. I'm just trying to make every issue, when you pick it up, I don't want it to be an opening image and a cliffhanger at the end, and you don't know what the other 20 pages were. And I feel like that's a very dangerous thing when it comes in writing like serialized ongoing comic books is what did I get out of that? Did I get a good, like, I got some there's a cool little fight there, but if like you don't get anything, if there's nothing tangible. So like that's what I've learned. I think there's a lot of that stuff, but like that's the fun part is like I've learned it's fun. I've learned it can be really hard some days. Like when the minute this is over, I'm literally gonna go sit down and work on 14 because I don't quite know what's going on pages 6 through 12, and those guys are gonna have to draw soon. So like that's hard, but like that actually is incredibly exciting because I've come up with things that I never would have done before because you just can't slow down. You got the planes in the air, you know what I mean? So it's been an amazing 12 issues. Hopefully we get to do 12 more and beyond. It's really flattering that anybody cares about this little weird story that's going on in my head. That's amazing. It's like, it really is. It's the most incredibly fulfilling. I like I said earlier, like I was 14 and I loved Image. I bought every single book. I have Spawn 1 and Savage Dragon 1 and Shadowhawk and Wetworks and Troll and Glory and Super Patriot, like weird books that like, but and Invincible and like all these. When you guys say people think of this in the same stroke as Invincible, I'm like, are you out of your mind? That's impossible, because Invincible is one of the greatest comic books ever created. And like, I learned so much from reading that book. And so the idea that I got to do, I'm getting to do an Image book that's in that vein. And I don't, it still doesn't feel real. It probably won't feel real until the book's over, when I don't have to do it anymore. And I'm like, oh, I'm done. No one's expecting any pages. What am I going to do? So I don't know, man. It's absolutely the most coolest thing in the world. Like I've got the best job ever. And it can be very, very scary and very sort of isolating. So coming on and talking to people like you guys is really helpful. It really, like, just having to talk to you. Like, I don't know if other writers talk about this stuff, but like the interview podcast part, the long form conversation, to talk to you guys for like an hour about this, you know how helpful that is? Because I get to go, I have to articulate things that I don't even quite know. Or you'll say something that I'm like, oh yeah, I never thought of it that way. And then that becomes part of the headcanon of the book. And then it's all additive. So like this is part of the fun part for me, is I get to do this and then I get to go take that and work it and make the book better. So as much as I appreciate you asking me, but thank you guys for all you do, because it makes the books better.
Oh, thank you. So we appreciate it. And I just want to say, like, I'm serious when I said I read for some people. We intuitively thought, especially me personally, we get so many. I think the question that we see the most being Radiant Black podcasts, or just people who podcast about the Massiveverse, just in general, focusing on that, is like, where do I start? Like, that's like the most common thing. Like, where do I start? And the thing that I found particularly interesting is that a lot of the newer readers who just came in like a month ago, 2 months ago, within the last 3 to 6 months, and we're just like, fuck, I want to begin where I want to begin. Their like entrance into the Massiveverse was through like Rogue Sun. Like that's a lot of people were saying Rogue Sun is what got me into the Massiveverse and what kept me in. That's amazing. Awesome. That's really cool to think about. Like Rogue Sun, not only people loved your title, but it got them to love the Massiveverse. Like that's for me, that's so cool. I looked at it, I'm like, people love Rogue Sun so much, they were like, oh, I also got to check this out. Like that's above. Like that's when they really love this shit, and they're like, wow, like, you know what I mean? And they're like, why aren't more people talking about this? And that's why we wanted to do the Rogue Sun podcast, because we're like, we are kind of talking about this here, but I kind of get why it's harder for people to find it, since we're like under this and that. But now you can find us on the Rogue Sun podcast. We talk about Rogue Sun all the time. We'll give away, with the launch of this episode, volume 1 and volume 2, because it'll be out then. So we'll have a whole thing. You can.
How about this too? Let me send me your address after this, and I'll sign a bunch of the variants I got, and I'll send them to you, and you can give those away too.
Whoa, best person ever.
My wife was very happy. There's a giant box sitting in the corner. She's like, gotta get this stuff away. So.
Yeah, but like, please check this book out. It's incredible. This is volume 1 of the trade. Obviously, I have the issues, but you can see the spot gloss. Look how shiny! Like, holy shit!
Oh, it's beautiful.
Fantastic stuff. And if you're like one of those people that like genuinely needs, there's everything here. And I know this. I'm showing this because people have asked. There's the cover gallery, and for those of you that are like the full-time nerds, they do have the character models in the back. So yes, they're there if you want to see them. It's such a beautiful book. It's a steal for $9.99 US. That's like, I swear it's free.
Yeah,
like when you compare it, I swear to God, when you compare it to Marvel and DC, they would charge you like 20 US for the same size. Yeah, 20 US for the same size book. It's crazy. 25 even for the same amount of issues, if not less. And they don't even have glossy paper. So
and Basuto does a great job making sure it's everything you want to be in a Massiveverse like volume. You always have like, oh, is that it? Of course it is. And you'll have like a Radiant language or whatever. And to wrap up the first episode of the Rogue Sun podcast, I mean, it's all downhill from here. We have Ryan on. Like, there's no better. But there's only a few days I can even ask this question. It's a very important one. It's Decision 2023. Ryan Parrott, who would you pick to carry on the Radiant Black mantle, Nathan or Marshall?
Oh, I already voted. I voted. Yeah, the minute I found out about that, I'm like, can I vote first? And he's like, yeah. Who would I vote? I can't actually say because I have like knowledge, insider
That's fair.
knowledge.
Yeah,
But,
that's
like
fair.
that's not, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
I could be
that's
hedging
fair.
my bets and people would read into it. So it's a good question.
True.
But I will tell you this: you guys are not ready for what Kyle's got intended. Man.
Oh
Like
my
he's been
God.
talking about this project for a very long time.
That's awesome.
I've been in many airports with him while we're we go to a con together and we're sitting around for 3 hours, and he has told me it like this is his baby. He's been working on this for a really long time. You guys will not be disappointed, I promise.
Okay.
Oh, we're very excited. We can't wait. Anyway, thank you so much, guys. Pick up Rogue Sun, Volume 1, been out. Volume 2 coming out May 17. Probably will be out by the time this episode is out. And yeah, please check out Rogue Sun. Check out the giveaway. And Ryan, check out our interview with Ryan Parrott because, goddamn, it's been a fun time. Thank you so much for joining us, Ryan. And we'll see you next time.
My pleasure.
Stay fiery. We'll come up with a.
Stay
phrase,
fiery.
right? Stay fiery. Stay blazy.
Stay roasty. That's the firepower
That's the
one. We got to
firepower
come up with
one,
another
yeah,
fire one.
We got to come up with another fire one. We'll figure it out. We'll see you next time. Don't beat up any high school kids or anything. Don't be a bully. Don't be a bully. All right.